Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Institute for Personal Development, where total consciousness is the new frontier. Kriya Yoga is the union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices that initiate this process.
Good morning. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's talk consciousness. I am your hostess, Lisa Winton, and with me is Kenny Toy, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of the Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Good morning, Swami. Thank you for being here today. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing pretty well today. How about you?
I'm doing wonderful, thanks. Thanks for asking. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Today on The Voice of Yoga, we will be talking about the new moon in Gemini as of yesterday the 16th and the beginning of Ramadan. We will discuss the importance of fasting in general and how it is used to develop the psychological organs of the individual. Fasting isn't random punishment, but it is discipline to strengthen the conscious mind and gain authority over the instinct and appetites of the physical body. Gemini is the sign of the lower mind and the concept of intelligence. Discipline fosters willpower and enables the rational mind to override the unconscious patterns of the physical body. That's a great description of today's show, Swami. Well, why don't you get us started? Let's talk about the new moon in Gemini.
Yeah, that new moon was conjunct Mars, which I think gives it a lot of energy. And the other thing that was pretty significant about the transit was Mercury, transiting Mercury, is transiting Neptune. Mercury is in Gemini, which is in rulership, and Neptune is in Pisces, which is rulership. So the whole thing of the relationship between mind and spirit, that's a really powerful call to action, the square, and those two principles being at a 90-degree angle to one another. So the whole thing being called of the relationship between the forces of spirit, which is the dissolving force of the universe. It's that force that is trying to bring everything back to a unified state. And then the whole thing of mind, which in our approach is mind is the creative principle, that in the beginning, the whole thing begins with thought. And then from that thought, we create reality. And so Mercury in Gemini, Mars, the moon, and the sun in Gemini, it's a real call for us to develop the conscious mind and what we call the lower mind, which is the part of mind that is directly related to our senses, which is the part of the mind that really works in the realms of duality, the dualistic dimensions. The senses operate primarily because of contrast. Contrast is what enables our senses to perceive what's before them. That's why duality is recognizable, that matter and mind, on one level, they are the parts of reality that are verifiable. The physical is visible and tangible. The realms of mind is invisible, but it is tangible. We can measure waves. We can find vibrations. And so the whole thing of the new moon being the new beginning, it's a great time to maybe start to think about growing psychologically and spiritually, and then, of course, being able to employ strategies. That's one of the reasons why in this show we like the idea that Ramadan begins after the new moon and the whole concept of fasting. And then how do you use strategies like fasting to help us develop our psychological organs, how to develop things like willpower. Because one of the misconceptions is that a lot of us think that I don't have willpower. And it's kind of like saying something similar, I don't have any endurance running. Mm-hmm. Well, these are things that are developable. You can work at it. You can start to increase your endurance levels. And by the same token, by enlisting strategies like fasting, you can start to develop willpower.
I know in my experience that developing willpower is very, very important, especially teaching children martial arts and giving them instructions, and there are certain things that they have to do at certain times, and them not being able to, speak when they want to. They always have to ask permission, things like that, and all that develops willpower. And I know we have talked about before several times about purification. Even just walking down a grocery aisle and just passing the Snickers bar, and not reaching out for it is, can lead to strengthening willpower, strengthening the mind. If you can be able to get through the grocery store without picking up the bag of chips, that could lead into strengthening the mind.
Yeah, that is a big part of human development. The whole concept of intelligence overriding instinct, appetite, preservation, and survival. It's the patterning of our bodies. See, our bodies have all the power. And we program our bodies. We're constantly being bombarded with information, with things like the media. And, of course, we start to internalize images in our bodies. And one of the things I always remember is watching television, and the next thing I know, I'm in front of the refrigerator. I want something. What's causing that? Well, you've internalized some sort of an image, and your body is looking for something. And because the body has all of the power, the body's going to run the show. Now, when you start to recognize that the whole developmental process begins when intelligence overrides this reflex response, that you have to develop your psychological organs, because matter has power, but it's blind. The mind has vision, but it's feeble and weak. Matter and mind need each other. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to take lame mind with vision and put it on the back of blind matter with power. And that's what gives us the ability to move our lives in a direction that would be optimal. So the whole concept of developing willpower, exercising your psychological organs, and the other thing that we also learn in Kriya Yoga is how to actually program your body with imagery that would be more in accordance with universal order as opposed to constant conflict, the battle between undesirable internalized images and what the conscious mind knows would be better for you. But the development of willpower is kind of like what gives you the hardware to start to perform this. And just like you said, just by exercising your psychological organs, adherence to dietary recommendations, adherence to an exercise program, these are all things that develop willpower. And a lot of times you see that they're missing in our normal behavioral lifestyles.
So we can say that anything that we do that instills discipline is a way to discipline the mind. Drive by the Dunkin' Donuts. Don't pull into the drive-thru. That's the first step. Incorporate an exercise program get up at a certain time every day, do those kinds of things, and do it consistently all the time, and that's what's going to develop the discipline of the mind.
And then through repetition comes absorption, and then eventually you change the pattern of the body. Because one of the things that you learn is that this concept of being spiritual is not deprivation. It may seem like it starts out that way, but remember, the Buddha had a really good observation when he was practicing extreme asceticism. There was a musician that went by in a boat, and the musician had said, if the string is too tight, it will snap, and if the string is too loose, it won't vibrate. And that was when it dawned on the Buddha that extreme asceticism really makes the string too tight. So just by denying your body all of the things that we're looking for, that we're yearning for, doesn't really produce liberation. But neither does indulgence. That makes the string too loose. So the whole thing is that first you have to divide and conquer before you can unite and stand, is basically the path to this thing called liberation, freedom, illumination. That's what we're trying to do. But in order to do it, you're going to need the hardware. You're going to need the psychological organs. And that's why in most of our religions we did have things like fasting. Fasting isn't random punishment. It's not giving up something and then indulging yourself in what you gave up afterwards. That's the psychological sand trap. The whole intention here is that you don't want to give up anything. You want to convert your body to one that draws on particles and waves, to a mind-body complex that now sustains itself on this indivisible unified field. That's what brings what they call liberation, or in certain religions, salvation. It's freedom from the cycle of death and rebirth. But willpower gives you a launching pad, exercising discipline. That strengthens your psychological organs. Your mind is just like any muscle in your body. See, if you don't exercise muscles, if you don't move your body, things atrophy. What we don't use, we lose. And look across the board today, how many people are losing their minds? And a lot of it is because our lifestyle is so void of discipline. We're accustomed to doing what we want, when we want, with whoever we want, and there's no resistance. It's kind of like one of the things I learned years ago when I started to practice meditation, that the whole thing it wasn't going to happen without concentration. It's kind of like you dam a river and then you can produce electricity. If you don't have that resistance, then you don't have anything that will produce pressure. And that is what gives things power. That resistance, kind of like when you're watering the garden. If you have a hose and you run out of hose and your stream of water is only just spilling out like a couple of feet from the hose, you could put your thumb over that hose, create some form of restriction, but it increases the pressure and it allows the water to shoot 10 or 15 feet. That's kind of like what happens with the mind-body complex. You develop these psychological organs. You develop willpower. You overcome the instincts and the appetites of the body, your unconscious patterns, your conditioned responses. But now your psychological organs are now able to extend their reach.
as far as fasting is concerned, fasting can also have a profound effect on the body as well, as far as what we were talking about before, as far as purification. So would you recommend that somebody fast a couple days a month in addition to, because you get that benefit as well, in addition to strengthening the mind and building discipline?
Oh, sure. Any type of, like we were saying, any type of exercise like that will start to develop your willpower. Just adherence to dietary recommendations, making choices about foods that you're putting in your mouth, eliminating foods like caffeine, nicotine, alcohol, refined sugars. Those are actually substances that undermine willpower. And so they produce these cravings and disturbances in the mind-body complex. So it's very important to maintain discipline throughout your normal lifestyle. And then to whatever degree you want to do that. Like you said, sometimes I recommend that people fast 1 day a week. Just stop eating. Drink plenty of water. Depending on where you are in your development.
Thank you for answering that question. So I think we're going to hold that thought and pause to hear a word from our sponsors. So listeners, we will be back in a few moments. Well, welcome back. For those of you just joining us, you are listening to The Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. So, Swami, if you don't mind, I want to get back and ask you a question about the new moon. And I was looking through Swami Kriyananda's Wisdom and Way of Astrology, and made some notes about a couple of things. And one was that the moon relates to the imagination. That was one point that he had made. And that Gemini relates to the third house, which is communication, and also that Mercury, its Nuda principle, is intellect and communication. Does all that have something to do with what's going on? Should we be concentrating at this time on communication and then using our creative forces to be better at communication, depending on what part of our lives that may have to that we may have to be better at?
Well, to answer your question, yeah, that's what we were talking about, the whole thing of what we called the lower mind, intelligence, and how we communicate even say, for example, it has a lot to do, like what you said, how we think, and the whole thing of using your imagination, your creativity, and educating yourself, which is a very third house principle.
Mm-hmm. So if I want to take advantage of this new moon, this energy, how do you recommend our listeners to take best advantage of this particular time?
Well, like we were saying, you want to start making some changes and do it with small steps. Try and do kind of like, I look at, say, for example, the whole thing of Ramadan, the whole thing of fasting during the day, and then causing yourself for that 30-day or 30-some-odd day period that requires a lot of discipline, because the automatic response is that you sometimes want to put something in your mouth, and that's what your body is calling for. And the mind, the conscious mind, has to step in at that moment and say, no, not now, I'll tell you when. And so little things like that start to develop this relationship between your mind and your body. And the more you understand that relationship, again, that your body has the power, the body is the one that has all of the needs, and it's in constant searching for something to make sure that it's okay, because remember, it has notes there, and it's like, am I okay? Am I okay now? Am I still okay? How about now? And it's grasping for anything that our minds will give it. And for the most part, what I call, or what we call today normal, I call neurotic, because we're accustomed to just giving our bodies pablum. We go from the car to the phone to the computer to the television to the refrigerator to the gym, and it's all driven by this blind need that I want something. Now, the whole key to yoga or religions in their original format was to recognize that we have this dynamic going on, and to train our bodies to look for what it really needs to produce this feeling that I'm okay. And so by training your body to look for your next breath and conditioning your body to use that to produce the feeling that I'm okay, there's a calmness, there's a stillness that overcomes that typical restlessness that most of us are just trying to perpetuate by giving it something that it doesn't need. So using this particular transit, to begin to understand that, and then to try and enlist some sort of plan so that you can start to move forward with your life, would be optimal for this particular new moon, new beginning.
And you had mentioned the new moon yesterday in our yoga classes about people taking advantage of the new moon. What can we expect to talk about Thursday on our Series 2 class? Will we be discussing the new moon and its application into our yoga in our lives and not on the mat?
Well, we usually do. We usually discuss what's going on, and the other thing is, a lot of times we go into a little bit more depth of just how we use salutation to the moon and salutation to the sun, that these are very specific movements that are designed to attune us to these force fields and energy systems. That salutation to the moon are 12 movements that actually tell the human mind-body complex where to go to find this invisible, intangible resource, this concealed deity that we're all in search of. because one of the things that we know is you can't perceive that through your senses if you haven't refined yourself. So by creating these movements, you're actually invoking the life force into all of the different systems that make up your physical body. And then salutation to the sun now becomes the opportunity we're able to demonstrate all of the qualities that our connection to this resource enables us to become. So these would be things that we would do in theory too.
We're looking forward to that class on Thursday so we can talk about, what did we do the last couple of days in relationship to this new moon, and then how did we best take advantage of that. I think that's important for us to discuss that as a group.
And also to start to see how other people are structuring their plan. Sometimes that type of forum is really helpful because you just get good ideas about what other people are doing with regard to creating a plan of action and what lifestyle strategies am I enlisting to help me keep my life on course.
Yeah, that's why I find it so helpful to attend that particular class. I want to remind our listeners that what we're trying to do here is we're trying to get this message out to as many people as we possibly can. And I know sometimes I forget to mention this in the closing of the show, so I want to make sure I just take a moment to talk about people about making sure that, if you see something on Facebook about the radio show, share it and like it, and let people know what it is that you're doing. I think sometimes we take on a particular activity like yoga and we make it very personal, and we don't want to share it because we don't want to have it interfere with our transformation, our ability to get better into our yoga practice. But we don't want people to do that. We want people to share this message and become involved.
Well, that concept is something we actually talked about, I think, last week when we talked about selfless service and how that becomes a completely different dynamic when your identity starts to transcend the limits of seeing yourself as a separate entity. Mm-hmm. That by one of the best ways to help yourself is by finding something outside yourself that needs that help, and then helping other people achieve that goal is actually the best way to help yourself.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's about that time when you need to start breaking down our show. So in the closing, I want to invite you listeners to visit our website. You can follow Swami on Pinterest and Twitter and also Facebook. And also available to you listeners are the online classes you can access through the website, www.ipdtransform.com. Click on the link for online classes, and it will direct you to a powwow, and then you can make your selections from there. But keep those comments, questions, and curiosities coming because Swami does enjoy hearing from you. And be sure to tune in next week. We will be celebrating Census Day, Kriya Yoga style. So, Swami, any thoughts or comments about our show this week or preview for next week's show?
Yeah, I think today's show would be a really good lead-in for what's going to happen next week, which was Senses Appreciation Day. And I think we'll probably talk a lot more about the actual development of the psychological organs and that part of the mind that is directly related to our senses. That's how we communicate with our environment. That's how we take in our information is through our senses, and then using our psychological organs to process that. Mm-hmm. And with that, I would like to invite people to join us, and like you said, like us, share us with however it is that you see that would be beneficial for anybody that you know. And with that, I'll wish everybody a good day. Namaste, and give it back to you.
Thank you, Swami, and I look forward to seeing you all on our Series 2 class Thursday nights at 7. So thank you for listening to our program, The Voice of Yoga. This is Lisa Winton along with Swami Jayananda signing off. Have a wonderful Kriya Yoga kind of day. Namaste.